ဒီနေ့တောက်ကြနေ့ကရှင်းပြခဲ့တဲ့စကားအဆက်ကလေးကိုယူပြီးတော့ဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့တရားဟောပါမယ်။အဲဒီတောက်ကြနေ့ကနိမလမှာအထုနိုင်ရေးအတွက်ဥက္ကပရိပု္ပ္ပာသဝနာဒါရဏသမစနဆိုတာအချက်၅ချက်ပြောသွားပါတယ်။အဲဒီအချက်၅ချက်ထဲကဥက္ကပရိပု္ပ္ပာသဝနာဆိုတဲ့အပိုင်းလေးထပ်မှပြီးတော့ဖြည့်ရှင်းပေးဖို့ရှိနေပါသေးတယ်။
On Friday, Sayadaw talked about an approach to right practice in terms of 5 aspects, namely of the aspect of studying or learning, that of questioning or discussion, listening, bearing in mind, and putting into practice. Today's talk will be a development from the talk that was given on Friday, and the Sayadaw would like to especially discuss the first 3 aspects of that approach to right practice.
အဲ့ဒီဥက္ကအယနိမအထုနိုင်ရေးအတွက်ဘယ်လောက်အတိုင်းအတာအထိစာပေကိုလေ့လာရမှာလဲဆိုတာပေါ့လေတချို့ကတော်များများကြီးလေ့လာထားမှတရားအထုတ်လို့ဖြစ်တယ်လို့ဒီလိုလည်းပဲအစွဲတွေရှိကြပါတယ်စာရီပေတွေများများကြီးဖတ်ထားမှများများကြီးလေ့လာထားမှတချို့ကလည်းပဲတန်ရုံလောက်ရှိလို့ရှိရင်ရပါတယ်ဆိုတာပေါ့လေဒီလိုလည်းပဲယုံကြည်ကြပါတယ်ယူဆချက်အမျိုးမျိုးတွေရှိပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီယူဆချက်အမျိုးမျိုးပေါ်မူတည်ပြီးတော့ဘုန်းကြီးဒီနေ့လောကီဥပမာလေးတွေနဲ့ရှင်းပြပါမယ်
One may ponder to what extent study or learning is required before one can walk on the right path, before one can do practice correctly. There are some who say that a great deal of learning is required to a large extent, to a great depth, before one can or one should start practice. And yet there are others who maintain that that is not quite necessary. One needs just some working knowledge and it will be quite all right to start the practice. So there are various views with regard to the extent of study or learning that is required before one actually treads the spiritual path.
တချို့ကလည်းပဲစာမတတ်တော့သူများရဲ့အလိမ်လှည့်ခံရတယ်လို့ဒီလိုလည်းပဲယူဆပြီးတော့ပြောကြပါတယ်တချို့ကလည်းပဲစာရီတိတ်တက်နေလို့ရှိရင်စာကတရားထုတ်ရမှာအတွေ့အကြုံကတရားထုတ်ရမှာအဟံတာကြီးဖြစ်တယ်လို့ဒီလိုလည်းပဲယူဆကြပါတယ်
There is a view that's commonly shared by most people that if one does not have sufficient knowledge or learning with respect to the way of practice, then one becomes very vulnerable to other people. One could be very easily deceived or fooled by anyone who professes to be an instructor or a teacher. On the other hand, others argue that too much knowledge, too much theoretical knowledge, and too much intellectual understanding could both to be a hindrance, an obstacle in the actual practice of meditation.
Mangara Atude ni Neneliti Yabare, Da Yope, Da Name Diodinani ha, Dwachabaga, Pibiro Piani, Anisa Diaribe, Polabio and Sierra Diaribe, to the water in the Pinirabe. Yere Kauza Chanda, Bamazuku, time Pitabe, so de Tilu Asweri Matavene Nisaruka, another Diaribe, Tilala, Pizum Tai, Lila Taluchi, Tuta Mia Nyaboli, Sapi, Pizum Mavi, Jangam Java.
As a matter of fact, it is stated in the scriptures that only a very basic knowledge is needed for a prospective practitioner. What is needed is just a basic understanding of Nama and Rupa, of mind and matter, of how these mental and physical phenomena arise and pass away at our six sense doors, or how they can be perceived arising and passing away at our six sense doors. It is also useful to comprehend that these phenomena are related by way of cause and effect, and that they also exhibit the characteristics of impermanence, or they come and go, and of suffering and unsatisfactoriness, for whatever that has come into being will eventually fall away from moment to moment. Also the notion of impermanence, of selflessness, of no self, should be correctly appreciated. That there is no one behind this whole stream of process, that this whole stream of mental and physical phenomena are occurring as a result of the unfolding of conditions and of based on the mechanism of cause and effect. It is important to be able to adopt this attitude of self-surrender, of surrendering this concept, this notion of a self, a permanent entity.
Guru Drivitandayari Atude Sura Mangaro Amatu Chin of Shinai Jagaroda Mo Asashi Kilita Seyogari Pabio Dwepa Pinay Lucian or Goloshin Yana Pidwa would be Atuara.
Essentially, the practice of Satipatthana Vipassana meditation is oriented towards the dispelling of greed, hatred and delusion, which we may not be aware of prior to our practice, and to actually clear them away if they do arise in the course of our practice, and eventually, of course, be able to uproot all of them altogether when one achieves arahantship.
Edilu Atoya Ma Sabijanga Amyuri Mananza Bimelu Matabi Melu Ato Kiyum here တိကျတဲ့ညွှန်ကြားချက်တွေရလို့ရှိရင်ကိုယ်ကလည်းပဲယုံကြည်ခြင်းနဲ့ဆန္ဒပြင်းပြပြထားပြီးတော့အားထုတ်မယ်ဆိုရင်ရာဂဒေါသမောဟတွေကင်းနိုင်ပါတယ်ဘုရားလက်ထက်တော်ကာလကလည်းပဲသမတတ်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေအများကြီးရှိပါတယ်ဒီနေရာဌာနမှာလောကီဥပမာလေးထည့်သွင်းပြောရမယ်ဆိုရင်နာမကျမ်းတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်များယောဂပျောက်ဖို့တော့သူတို့လူလားကြပါတယ်မိမိတို့ကစိတ်အတ္တပညာတွေစိတ်သိပ္ပံတတ်ပညာတွေမတတ်တော့မတတ်ဘူးဒါတော့ကိုယ်တိုင်မကူစားနိုင်မကူစားတတ်ဘူးဒီတော့ကူစားပေးတဲ့စိတ်ချရတဲ့ဆရာဝန်တွေထံချင်းကပ်ပြီးတော့ယောဂဖြစ်ဖို့အကြောင်းပြောပြဆရာကသိပြီးတော့ယောဂရဲ့အမြင်ရင်းနေနားလည်ပြီးတော့တင့်တော်တဲ့ဆေးဝါးပေးလိုက်လိမ့်မယ်ညွှန်ကြားချက်တွေပေးလိုက်လိမ့်မယ်အဲ့ဒီညွှန်ကြားချက်အတိုင်းစီးမိဝဲရင်ဆရာဝန်ညွှန်ကြားတဲ့အတိုင်းနေတတ်လို့ရှိရင်ယောဂတွေပျောက်တယ်ကိုယ်တိုင်ကဆေးချမတတ်ပြီပဲလို့ဆရာဝန်ညွှန်ကြားတဲ့အတိုင်းကျင့်သုံးတော့ယောဂတွေပျောက်တယ်လို့ပါပဲ
The point is that one need not necessarily be a scholar in order to embark on this spiritual path. As long as one has the basic understanding of mind and matter and so forth, which was mentioned earlier, one is well equipped in respect of theory to be able to walk the spiritual path till the end. That is, to achieve a state of purity whereby one has uprooted the defilements of greed, hatred, delusion, and so forth. This is pretty obvious. Even during the Buddha's time, there were many people, there were many disciples of the Buddha who were not scholars. Indeed, many of them were not at all versed in the scriptures. They just became monks and they got the meditation subjects from the Buddha and they just practiced. And in a short time they were able to be enlightened. Perhaps we can illustrate this argument by a common day example. Today there are many people who get ill and unwell, and they are desirous of being cured of their ailments. Now, as you know, not everybody is a doctor. And because not everybody has a great deal of knowledge about medicine, about various ways of health therapy and so forth, one invariably has to seek the advice and help of a qualified practitioner. So we go to see our doctor, our physician, and we open our heart to him. We tell him what has happened. We tell him of all the symptoms in a very open and frank manner. And our physician will listen to us, take notes. He will diagnose our situation and give us some prescription in order for us to help ourselves cure the sickness or ailment that we are suffering from. One need not be a scholar, one need not be a MD, but if we have trust and we follow the prescriptions and advice of our doctor, then we can cure ourselves.
ပြီးတော့စာပေပရိယတ်ကတော့တတ်ထားရင်တော့ကောင်းပါတယ်တတ်တဲ့လောက်ကိုကတုံးချရလို့ရှိရင်တော့အမှန်အကျိုးများပါတယ် တတ်နိုင်တဲ့လောက်သင်ကြားနိုင်ပါတယ်ကိုယ်အတွက်လည်းပဲအသုံးချအများအတွက်လည်းပဲအသုံးချနိုင်ပါတယ်အထူးအားဖြင့်ကိုယ်ကတစ်ဆင့်ပရိယမကင်းတဲ့စာပေမကင်းတဲ့လက်တွေ့သင်္နာပို့ချမဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေဆရာလောင်းနေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တာပြီးတော့မှလိုအပ်ပါတယ်
However, this does not mean that anyone is putting down the actual study of the scriptures. Studying the scriptures, gaining a deeper knowledge and more intellectual understanding of the Dhamma is indeed very useful. It is especially useful for people who intend to become teachers. For a thorough intellectual understanding of the Dhamma is almost a pre-requirement, a prerequisite for someone who wishes to teach others. And so we can see that study by itself could be very useful for oneself as well as for other people.
ဒါလေးနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့လောကီဥမာနဲ့ရှင်းပြီးတော့ပြောချင်တာတချို့ကျမ်းမာရေးလိုက်စားတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေဟာစိတ်ပညာပွဲတော့မရပါဘူးဒါပေမဲ့လို့ကျမ်းမာရေးနဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့အကြောင်းအရာတွေတော့ဗောလေဟိုစာဖတ်ဒီစာဖတ်ဖတ်ပါတယ်စိတ်အကြောင်းအရာလေးတွေလည်းပဲရပါတယ်ဒီစိတ်ဟာ formula ပဲလို့ရှိတယ်ဆိုတာဒီလိုလည်းပဲသူတို့လေ့လာကြပါတယ်အဲဒီလိုလေ့လာထားတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေဟာတစ်ချိန်နာမကျမ်းဖြစ်ရင်စိတ်ချရတဲ့ဆရာဖြစ်ပေမဲ့လို့ဒီစိတ်ကformula ပဲလို့ပါနဲ့ဘယ်ယောဂနဲ့တင့်နေစသည်ပေါ့ဆရာပေးတဲ့စိတ်ချလက်ချပေါ့လေမိဝဲရမယ်အစားဒီစိတ်ထဲမှာပါရညာတွေပါတယ်စိတ်ကပါရီလွန်ခဲ့တဲ့စသည်ပေါ့လေဝေပါပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေညှင်းဆန်ပြီးတော့စိတ်မှမစားတာတွေလေဒီလိုလည်းရှိတတ်တယ်ပြီးတော့အဲ့ဒီလိုကိစ္စတွေမှာကိုကကျွမ်းကျင်ခြင်းမရှိလို့ရှိရင်ဆရာပေးတဲ့ဆေးကိုယုံကြည်ခြင်းနဲ့ပေါ့လေဝေပါမဲနဲ့မိခွဲလို့ရှိရင်ယောဂပျောက်သွားတယ်ဒီမှာ
You may not be a qualified practitioner. You may not be a qualified doctor. But you may have read a lot about medicine and you have a keen interest in the field of medicine, in health. You read up a lot of books and periodicals and journals on medicine, on health. And you have quite a good understanding of the field of medicine, the field of physical health. Now say that you become ill one day, and though you may be quite versed to some extent with respect to medicine and physical health, nevertheless you are unable to cure yourself as you have not had any professional qualifications. So you go see your doctor, and the doctor diagnoses your case, gives you some prescriptions, you take it back home and you look at some of the medicine, some of the drugs that he has given you, and you look through and you examine the formula, and you start to analyze the situation. You start to be too clever, and you begin to have different views, and perhaps you feel that, well, this medicine should not have been prescribed, maybe something else would have been better for me, and so forth. So at that point, instead of having trust and confidence in your doctor, you are beginning to undermine his good intentions. You do not take the medicines regularly or according to prescription, and as a result, your illness is not cured. So it is very important for us, as long as we are not professionally qualified or not at all competent, to be humble enough to put our faith and confidence, to have trust in your physician.
တချို့လည်းပဲမြွေးနေကြအိမ်သုံးဆေးလေးတွေပေါ့လေမြွေးတာလည်းရှိပါတယ်။နောက်နာမကျဖြစ်တဲ့အခါကျတော့ဆရာဝန်ကပေးတဲ့ဆေးမြွေးတဲ့အခါကိုယ်စကုံအောင်မစားသေးဘူးနဲ့ယောဂကသိပြီးတော့မထူးခြားလာသေးဘူးဆိုရင်ကိုယ်အိမ်ကဆေးနဲ့ရောပြီးတော့စားတာတွေလည်းရှိတတ်ပါတယ်။ခါတစ်ခါလည်းပဲဆေးအာနိသင်ကြီးကတူတော့လွန်သွားတာတွေလည်းရှိနေပါတယ်။မျှတာတွေလည်းရှိနေပါတယ်။အဲ့ဒါလို့ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ယောဂကသိပြီးတော့မထူးခြားလို့ဖြစ်တတ်ပါတယ်။
Another case could be of a person who is in the habit of taking some medicine, some drugs that has been stored in the house, or he or she has access to some easily available medicines which are stored conveniently in one's household. Now come the time when one falls sick, then one goes to see one's doctor and he prescribes a course of treatment for us. So one comes back home and without consulting one's physician, one continues to resort to the medicines and drugs at home and sort of continue one's old habits, as well as listening or abiding by the doctor's prescription. Now that may not be a very wise thing to do, because the the medicine that we are taking under the counter, so to speak, could very well cause a lot of complications to ourselves as a result of being incompatible with the course of treatment prescribed by one's physician.
နာမကျမ်းဖြစ်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ရင်တူရမယ်လို့ဆေးချမ်းမတတ်တာနဲ့ဆေးအတတ်မတတ်တာအရှင်းမတတ်တာနဲ့နည်းနည်းကျဉ်းကျဉ်းတတ်တာနဲ့ကြွားချတာအဲ့ဒီဟာပါပဲနာမကျမ်းတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ချင်းတူရမယ်လို့ဆေးသိပ္ပံအရှင်းမတတ်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်နဲ့နည်းနည်းကျဉ်းကျဉ်းမတော်တစ်ခေါက်တတ်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်အဲ့ဒါကြွားချတာပဲလို့ယောဂကုသတဲ့နေရာမှာပျောက်ပုံချင်းကြွားချတာပါ
In the treatment of patients, one can see the difference between treating a patient who has some general knowledge of medicine, but not quite enough knowledge to qualify to be a professional, and the treatment of a patient who is completely ignorant about medicine and health therapy.
တနည်းဥပမာလည်းပဲလူနှစ်ဦးခရီးအတူပေါ့လေသွားတဲ့အခါတူဦးကတော့လမ်းခရီးကြမှာအတိမိတ်ဆွေအိမ်တအိမ်မှမရှိဘူးတူဦးကတော့အတိမိတ်ဆွေအိမ်နေများတယ်တစ်ချိန်နဲ့ခရီးထွက်တဲ့အခါအတိမိတ်ဆွေလမ်းခရီးကြမှာအရှင်းမရှိတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ကတော့သူလန့်သူမှန်မဲ့သွားတော့တတ်မှတ်ထားတဲ့အချိန်နဲ့စောရောက်နိုင်ပွဲရှိပါတယ် Khi cha mà ati mấy suy nhà để bố cô cả đó ati mấy suy đi ai quên bị đó bỏ đi nấu xe sẽ gặp cho lại phàm xí lại sa thì lâu này lâu xí khi phiền nhiên qua vào đây bây giờ đây bây giờ mà cho chuyện này bố cô cả đó sẽ biểu để đại bỏ đi lâu 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 xí nhẹ khi vào rồi nên nên sa li ba li nhà li bỏ đi uni đi ni li bỏ đi nhà đó để bố cô cả đó xin nhiệm vụ đi miễn này lâu xí đó là để khi mình học phải chết đã phải ai đi uống mà nên là phải xin chi gì chi bảo
Another very interesting example is that of two travelers who are going on a similar journey. The first traveler is one who knows a lot of people on the way. He's got many friends and relatives and colleagues and so forth along the way. The second traveler is quite a stranger. He knows the way, but he doesn't have many friends. He doesn't have any friends at all, or colleagues, or relatives on the way to his destination. You can see that though both of them may set off at the same time, it will take longer for the first traveler to reach the final destination because he's got to pay so many visits on his way. He's having a nice time talking to a friend here and conversing with a relative there and so forth. But the second traveler is very easygoing. He just sets on his journey and he goes straight on the road, and within a short time he reaches his desired destination without any obstruction or delay at all. So too in the practice, there may be some people who have some degree of understanding of the Dhamma, some theoretical knowledge of meditation and some experience perhaps. And yet again there is another type of yogi who is quite a greenhorn. The second type of yogi is completely new to the scene and doesn't have much theoretical knowledge or past experience with regard to meditation. And we can draw the analogy of the two travelers to these two types of yogis. For the first type of yogi, it may be rather a long and tiring journey and a delayed one before he reaches the final destination. Whereas for the second yogi, who has got good faith and trust in the teacher and just carry out instructions without thinking too much, will be able to reach the desired destination in no time at all.
In the Adhanava, Todavan Pibijare, Sindari Bodra, Shimogulang, Gurumyaji, Mia Temepo, Diadu Yashi, Dwe, Sele Ato de Aka, Nyajishim Chide, Sindari Bodra, Shimogulang, Shimogulang, no Javido, Tabat, no Javido, Diadu Yaboni, Shimogulanga, the Lindaba Sovido, Diadu Yaboni, Pioviazi.
So I would like to talk a little on how the two great disciples of the Buddha, the Venerable Sariputta and the Venerable Moggallana, it may be interesting for you to know that Sariputta, who was famous for his great wisdom And Moggallana, the great disciple, famed for his psychic powers, achieved enlightenment at different rates. While both of them were enlightened, after both of them had become stream winners, stream entrants, it took Sariputta 1 week later to become an arahant compared to Moggallana.
Niya ma be sura di lo be tchu ka twet tha ja ba le. Nyan ji dain le be chi dan ka ma phit nai ba bu. Shi Sariputta ko ro mya ha nyan aya ma ro acha acha tawaka de de ata song ba be. Sattu kap po Myat Swa Bhuya ni ni nyan ji de lo di lo jang ngan mya ma song mein jet shi ba le. Ba phit lo nyan ji shin ka Dafa nau cha bi ro yahana phit ya daro soda sin sa sia achek kali po la ba le.
There is a common myth that intelligent people tend to always be at the lead. Now, the Venerable Sariputta was famed to be a great disciple of great wisdom. His wisdom was only second to the Lord Buddha himself when compared to the rest of the Buddha's disciples. And yet, it is ironical that he should attain enlightenment a week later than Moggallana. Well, if one were to ask why that is possible or why that happened, Sayadaw says it's very easy. The answer is because he was too intelligent. He was too clever.
Buni phi ma pe ke logi uma li pyo piya si. Loka ma shin biyan do tamara do soda mini soda shi ba da. Tero mimi do ne ai nga apin thwat khan ni ma tero tu de thwat lo ma ya ba bu. Thwat chin ne thwat lo ma ya ba bu. Tu ye shi bai ma bo li sa sa ya asin pi aung so pi do pin sin pe ya de kaisa ri ya awna ma ya ba le. Tit pi do khana ji je ba le. Tero ne ma thwat phit. Yo tama pugu tyaw ha mimi ne ai ma tacha twa lo shi yinချက်ချင်းထွက်သွားချက်ချင်းပဲခီးရောက်တာပဲဟိုရှင်မင်းနေသမရတွေကတော့တဲခန္ဓာတာတဲကြည့်ကြတာပဲတော်တော်နဲ့ကိုမထွက်ဖြစ်ဘူးအဲ့ဒါလေးတွေရှင်းကြည့်ပေါ့ဘာဖြစ်လို့ရိုးရိုးပုဂ္ဂိုလ်နဲ့မတူရသတုံးဆိုတော့ခန္ဓာကြည့်ကြလို့ခန္ဓာကြည့်ကြပဲချက်နေတာပဲအဲ့ဒါတွေရှိပါတယ်
Well, before going further into that very interesting event, Sayadaw would like to draw your attention to the life of very important persons, of important dignitaries, of presidents and prime ministers and kings and queens and so forth. Such very important people find it very difficult to want to take an evening walk, for example. It's not so easy for them to leave their abode. In order to do that, they have to, first of all, inform their security guards, and they will have to make all the proper arrangements to ensure that there is top-level security when these very important persons step out for a very simple evening walk. And you can see that the reason behind this difficulty is because there is too much protocol. There is too much. There are too many things involved. Too much red tape, so to speak. No.
ရှင်သာရိပုတ္တရာကိုယ်တော်မြတ်ကြီးကညာကသိကြီးတော့လက်တွေ့တရားကျင့်သုံးတဲ့အခါသဘောတရားလေးတစ်ခုခုတွေ့လို့ရှိရင်နီးပေါင်းတစ်ထောင်နဲ့ဆင်ញင်တယ်သုံးတတ်တယ်ဟာပဲသဘောတစ်ခုတွေ့လို့သဘောတရားလေးတစ်ခုတွေ့လိုက်လို့ရှိရင်နီးပေါင်းတစ်ထောင်နဲ့လိုက်လို့ဆင်ញင်သုံးတတ်တယ်အဲ့တော့ဉာဏ်ကြီးတော့ဉာဏ်ကိစ္စတွေကများတဲ့အတွက်ယဟနာဖြစ်နှောင့်နှေးသွားတာအဲ့ဒါပဲ
Well, it seems that because of the super intelligence of the Venerable Sariputta, he used to get caught up in a lot of thinking whenever he discovered an interesting experience in his meditation. It seems that if he were to encounter a very unusual experience, he would reflect on it and look at it from 1,000 viewpoints.
ဘာတော့တင့်တော်စွာနီးတွေနဲ့ဆင်သုံးတတ်တော့သူဟာနဲ့သူစာရွေးနဲ့လက်တွေ့ပေါ့လေခွင်ကြဖြစ်ပါတယ်သိအဆင်ပြေပါတယ်
For Sariputta, however, since his reflection on his experience was based on very intelligent knowledge and understanding of the Dhamma, it was okay for him.
ရှင်မောကလန်ကိုရမြတ်ကတော့ဉာဏ်ကမကြည့်ရှာတော့ဉာဏ်ကိစ္စမများဘူးဒီလိုပေါ်ဒီလိုမှစူးစိုက်စိုက်မှတိတာပြောစသည်ပေါ့လေညွန်တဲ့အတိုင်းပဲလုပ်တာပဲညွန်တဲ့အတိုင်းလုပ်တော့ညံပဲခီးရောက်သွားတာပဲဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့ဉာဏ်မကြည့်တော့ဉာဏ်ကိစ္စနည်းတယ်စီရင်မှုနည်းတယ်စီရင်မှုနည်းတော့အလုတ်ကိုပြီးလို့တော့ဉာဏ်ခီးရောက်တာပေါ့
And since the Venerable Moggallana was not so brilliant, he did not think too much. Whenever he had any unusual experience, it would be very simple for him. He just note it and let it go. And another one comes and he notes it and it goes. And so it was a very simple task for him to get enlightened. ဘုန်းကြီးတဘောကတော့ရှင်သာရိပုတ္တရာလမ်းစဉ်မလိုက်ဖဲနဲ့ရှင်မောက္ကလန်လမ်းစဉ်လိုက်ချင်တာအဲ့ဒါကမြန်မြန်နေရကြတယ်ဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့လူတွေကတက်တန်းတူတယ်ကိုယ်ရေးရှိတုန်းခါလေးအားထုတ်ရတာကိုရာဂဒေါသမောဟဒီကိလေသာတွေကင်းပြပြီးတော့အ ਨੇ ဆုံးအပယ်လေးပါးကလွတ်မြောက်ရေးအတွက်ညွန်တဲ့အတိုင်းပေါ်လေးဖိပြီးတော့အားထုတ်တာဟာမြန်မြန်ခီးရောက်တယ် Sayadaw would like very much for all of you to follow in the footsteps of Moggallana. And he has reason to be so concerned about your way of practice. For this is a short life. Human life is short. And we have a short lifespan and we have no time to waste. And walk fast, note quickly, and let go of all your interesting experiences, and go right on and become a Sotapan right away. And when you become one, then you'll be free from the dangers of being reborn again in states of ရှင်သာရိပုတ္တရာညာနီးနီးစီရင်သုံးတတ်တတ်လို့ရှိရင်တော့တော်ပါရဲ့ကိုသိတဲ့မြတ်စာပေဘုဒ္ဓလေးနဲ့အခြားလောကီအတတ်ပညာလေးနဲ့ပေါ့လေတရားထုတ်တဲ့အခါမှာနီးမဟုတ်မဟုတ်ဖြစ်မဖြစ်တော်မတော်စသည်ပေါ့လေဒီမှာစင်ញင်တတ်ပါတယ်တချို့
Signano Goga Piware Piwa on body. Massignan that door. Nene Kakeli tweeted. John Jew Sami the Lamasami Ula, who were the Mia the Lama Mia Ula body. Dilu Signan Ave, Paramado Yoda Signan Ave. Yanga Mamiro. Dama Yumatan Yariga, we will at Lezadore. Ubia Beka Tandirana Mukina, Wizikisa, one city. Who were the Mia Vido, Mamma, Tomato, Timothy, Saravali, Chin. Every Chinyanga, Nyanga Mamiro, Wizikis, no stylish, Yumatan Yaji went all this, Tiama, Yai, no shaped. Wizikisa, Lezaji, Kayara.
Well, if any of you has the intelligence or the brilliant wisdom of Sariputta, Sayadaw would not try to prevent you from following his footsteps. However, if we are not quite up to the mark, and with our little knowledge of the Buddhist scriptures, or our chop suey knowledge of various methods of practice, it may be rather clumsy or cumbersome for us to get involved in the 1001 viewpoints when we encounter interesting experiences. And that happens because our knowledge, our insight is still immatured. Excessive thinking and reflection would lead us to a very vulnerable position whereby doubt, the mental factor of doubt, very easily infiltrate into that space and pose as wisdom and pose as knowledge. And when that happens, this doubt, which is masquerading as wisdom, as knowledge, can really give us a lot of trouble. We can be very easily tricked and deceived by this pseudo-knowledge and led quite astray from the path of practice.
So that Sinyana Nya, a young song biddo, Wiziki Saga Wally, slit at the volley, but early take the guitar, the point to the anime.
It is very important for yogis to be on guard against this mental factor of doubt, which infiltrates into that space of reflection and poses as knowledge, as wisdom. For we can very easily fall prey to it and be led astray. We can be deceived and tricked.
Say this, Raga, I'm not a Pimiana. Second, 20 Mago, she knows Sessavi of Chidwari, Ablamiana. The Manila solution where the Rosidia, a young lega, Museum Chidwabi, Eradi, take the guitar, Verma. You know, Tijarem ha Malu Ade Diariga, way out with a young song with a cherry, take your account.
You may be informed, or you should be informed, that the mind is extremely quick. Within a minute, mind states can change so fast that you'll be in a daze before you know it. If one has an understanding, or if one appreciates the fact of this great velocity of the mind, great speed of change of the mind, then Sayadaw hopes that you will also understand how easily one can get caught and deceived by this pseudo knowledge.
ဒီရနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့ဘုသူတ္တလည်းဖြစ်စေပို့ပြီးတော့လည်းပဲပေါ်လွင်စေတဲ့အနေနဲ့အနောက်နိုင်ငံမှာတွင်ကျဲနေတဲ့ယူသနေစီယာဆိုတာပေါ့လေတနည်းအားဖြင့်လည်းမာစီကီလိန်ဆိုတဲ့စကားနဲ့စကားလေးနဲ့ရှင်းပြစီ
At this point, Sayadaw would like to digress a little bit and talk a little on this concept of mercy killing that is so popular in the West, was or has been so popular in the West, so that you can gain an insight into this very quick and deceptive quality or propensity of one's mind.
ကျင်နာတတ်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ဟာဒုက္ခရောက်နေတဲ့တတ္တဝါတွေခွေးလေးတွေပါလေးတွေကအစပေါ့လေလူတွေကြီးကျယ်ဒုက္ခရောက်နေတာတွေ့လို့ရှိရင်စစ်မှန်တဲ့ကရုဏာကျင်နာမှုဖြစ်တတ်ပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီဆင်းရဲတွေကိုပယ်ရှားလို့တဲ့တန့်ရှင်းတဲ့စိတ်ဓာတ်မျိုးဖြစ်တတ်ပါတယ်
When we come across poor animals who are suffering, or even people who are suffering from some disease or some circumstances, then indeed one can truly be filled by a deep sense of compassion, of pity.
တွေ့ရပါမရတော့ကျင်နာမှုကနေပြီးတော့ဒေါမနစခေါ်တဲ့တောကပြောင်းလဲသွားတတ်ပါတယ်ဒီတော့ဒီဟာကိုတွေ့ပါမရတော့စိတ်ကမချမ်းသာဘူးစောကဖြစ်လာတယ်စောကဖြစ်လာတော့ဒီဟာတေတာကောင်းတာပဲဆိုပြီးတော့ခွေးလေးတွေကြောင်လေးတွေပေါ့လေတချို့လူနာတွေတော့မှမျောလင်းချက်မရှိဘူးဆိုရင်မာစီကီလင်းလောက်လိုက်တာရှိပါတယ်ဒီလိုလောက်ရတာဟာတဲ့ခုနဒုက္ခိတတတ္တဝါလေးတွေလူနာတွေပေါ်မှာတဏှာလို့လှုပ်လိုက်တာတဲ့အမှန်ကတော့တဏှာတာတော့ရှေ့ပိုင်းမှာတော့တဏှာတာအမှန်ပါပဲဒါပေမဲ့လို့သူ့မှာစိတ်မချမ်းသာမှုတောကဖြစ်သွားတာတော့သူမသိလိုက်ဘူးအဲ့ဒီဒေါမနတခေါ်တဲ့ဒေါမနတဝင်ရောက်ပြီးတော့လှည့်စားလိုက်တာပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒါနဲ့တတ်တာ
In fact, such a noble feeling of great compassion for others who are undergoing suffering of various sorts can lead us to think of various ways and means of relieving that particular being from suffering. That, in fact, is a very wholesome space of mind. However, if we come to see, or if we encounter, we confront such suffering very often, and if we are unable to actually relieve that being of the suffering, our compassion can very subtly turn into sorrow and sadness, which actually is a manifestation of dosa, of anger. From compassion to sorrow to anger disguised as compassion. That being has no right to suffer. That being must be relieved of suffering at all cost. It sounds very noble, but does it really come from a space of compassion or from a space of disgust, which is a manifestation of aversion, of anger. So it is not unusual for us to hear of cases where people resort to killing of animals, for example. They justify their actions by saying that, well, we are only trying to relieve the suffering, so we put a bullet through its head. And there are also cases of human beings who suffer from various ailments. And of course there are famous cases of how euthanasia has been applied to in order to relieve the suffering of that poor human.
ကျင်နာတဲ့ကရုဏာရဲ့အဝေးဆုံးယန္တုဟာရက်ဆက်မှုပဲဝိဟိစာဆိုတာရက်ဆက်မှုပဲအဝေးဆုံးယန္တုရှိတယ်လို့အနည်းဆုံးယန္တုလည်းရှိတယ်သူရဲ့အနည်းဆုံးယန္တုဟာဒေါမနစခေါ်တဲ့စောကပဲ
If we look at compassion as a mental state and analyze it in terms of opposites, we could say that the far enemy of compassion is cruelty, and the near enemy, the proximate enemy of compassion is aversion.
အဲ့ဒီအနည်းယန္တုရဲ့ဝင်ရောက်ပုံလေးတွေကိုဝင်ရောက်ပြီးတော့လှည့်စားပုံလေးတွေမသိတော့တဏှာလို့တတ်လိုက်တယ်သူတဏှာလို့တတ်လိုက်တယ်ဆိုတဲ့ဒီစကားဟာလောကမှာတွင်ကျဲနေပါတယ်အမှန်ကတော့စိတ်ရဲ့အပြောင်းလဲတွေမသိတောကရဲ့ဝင်ရောက်လှည့်စားပုံလေးတွေကိုမသိလို့ဒီလိုပြောတဲ့စကားပါ
Ignorance of the fact that aversion has infiltrated into our minds and thinking that we are still acting out of a true sense of compassion, then one can be very easily led to the situation where one would say, well, I'm only killing it to relieve it from suffering. It's merciful killing. But the point is that one has been deluded, one has been deceived by this near enemy of compassion. And because of this very fast rate of change of one's mental attitude, and because we have not been able to see or not been able to penetrate into this rapid change from compassion to aversion, we have been led astray, we have been deceived, we have been tricked, victims of a unfortunate event.
ဝိညာဉ်ကိုလက်တွေ့ကျင့်သုံးရတဲ့တရားနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့အလေးမြတ်ထားပြီးတော့ပြောနေတာပါအခုပြောခဲ့တဲ့ဟာလေးကတော့ပို့ပြီးတော့ပေါ်လွင်အောင်ဆိုပြီးတော့ရှင်းရှင်းလင်းလင်းသိရေးအတွက်ဘုဒ္ဓရဖြစ်ရေးအတွက်အပိုထည့်ပြီးတော့ပြောရတာပါ
Well, this slight digression from the task of meditation has been added with a good intention that you might gain some knowledge from that and that you will be able to apply that knowledge to your own meditative practice.
ဘယ်လောက်ဒီအရေးကြီးတယ်လဲဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဖျားလက်ထက်တော်ကာလကပုံနာယတိအမျိုးသားတယောက်မြတ်စွာဘုရားထံဟောရောက်ချီပြီးတော့မေးပါတယ်အခုကာလဝါဒတွေကအမျိုးမျိုးဖျားတဲ့ဟိုကတစ်မျိုးဒီကတစ်မျိုးဟိုဆရာကြီးကတစ်မျိုးဒီဆရာကြီးကတစ်မျိုးဆိုတာဘယ်ဟာရဲ့လို့အတိအကျ ယုံရမှမသိလောက်အောင်ဖြစ်နေပါတယ်တဲ့သူဆိုလိုတဲ့သဘောကတော့မြတ်စွာဘုရားအယူဝါဒတွေလည်းပဲသိစိတ်မချသေးဘူးဆိုတဲ့သဘောမျိုးပေါ့ဒီတော့ဝေဘာမှုအမျိုးမျိုးတန်တရားအမျိုးမျိုးတွေအမျိုးဖြစ်နေတော့မြတ်စွာဘုရားကအဲ့ဒီလိုဝေဘာယုံမှားပြီးတော့နေတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ကိုငါဘုရားလည်းမတတ်နိုင်ဘူးတဲ့ဒီလိုမေးရှိပါတယ်
To further illustrate the gravity of the situation with respect to doubt, Sayadaw recalls an incident during the Buddha's time when a Brahmin approached the Buddha and complained that there are so many philosophers going around and so many different philosophies, so many different beliefs and spiritual systems, and each of them say that theirs is the right way. And how can one differentiate? How can one decide which is in fact the right and correct way? But he was asking this as not so much from a sense of really wanting to know, but because he was out there trying to criticize the Buddha's teaching too. And at that point, the Buddha, knowing the state of mind of this particular person, told the Brahmin, Brahmin, I'm unable to be of any help to a person who is filled with doubts and criticisms.
ချိန်လည်းကြာသွားပါပြီတိုက်တွန်းပြီးတော့တရားဝဲသိမ့်ပါတော့မယ်ဒီတော့ဘုန်းကြီးတို့တွေဘုန်းကြီးတို့ယောဂီတွေခုနရှင်တာရိပုတ္တရာကိုရမကြီးရှင်မောက္ကလကိုရမကြီးတရားအထုတ်တဲ့လမ်းစဉ်ပေါ့ဒီနောက်ကျတဲ့လမ်းစဉ်နဲ့မြန်တဲ့လမ်းစဉ်ပေါ့ဒီအဲ့ဒီလမ်းစဉ်တစ်ခုကိုတည်နာလည်ပြီးတော့ရှင်သာရိပုတ္တရာလမ်းစဉ်ပေါ့ဒီခဏရနာထားပြီးတော့ရှင်မောက္ကလလမ်းစဉ်ကိုပြပြဘဝလိုက်နိုင်ပြီးတော့မြန်ကိလေသာတွေပေါ့ဒီအထူးအားဖြင့်အပယ်နဲ့ဆက်တဲ့ကိလေသာတွေမြန်ပြုတ်နိုင်တဲ့အထိကြိုးစားပွားများအထုတ်နိုင်ကြပါစေလို့တိုက်တွန်းရတဲ့ဒီနေ့တရားစိတ်သုံးသပ်လိုက်ပါတယ်
To conclude tonight's talk, the Sayadaw hopes that all of you may be able to differentiate and understand, be able to distinguish the difference in the way of practice that was done by Sariputta and that was carried out by Moggallana. And he sincerely beseeches all of you to put aside Sariputta's way for a moment and follow the Venerable Moggallana's footsteps so that you may quickly cut through all the defilements and attain enlightenment.